And I hope that you're going to be seeing the screen. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Okay. And
Get rid of the being recorded thing.
Oh, that
Where it says okay across the top, because it's obscuring part of them.
I don't know what the heck. There we go.
So that temple's gone, George?
Gone.
Gone.
Yeah. Beautiful 3-story pagoda.
Okay, so here we go.
They don't have to see us.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I hope you can all hear us. So I'm George and my wife Willa. As you know from the information that John sent out, Willa's field is Japanese art history, specializing in Buddhist art, and my field is Japanese religion, the history of Japanese religion, with a focus on Buddhism. So we taught at the University of Hawaii for almost 30 years, and all the time we were there, our research and publications and presentations were all about religion and art in Japan. But we kept saying for years, we have all of these Buddhist temples in Hawaii, and at some point we should write a book about the Buddhist temples in Hawaii. And so when we retired in 2006, many years ago, we decided to do the book, and so we took 3 years, and we visited every existing Japanese Buddhist temple in Hawaii on all of the different islands. There are 90 of them left. And in 2013, we published the book whose cover you see here on the screen. So the cover photo is of a pagoda in Lahaina, Maui, and it's no longer there because it burned completely in the Lahaina wildfire of 2023. But it's a great photo because it says Japanese Buddhist temple. When you look at that pagoda, it's very clear that it's about Japanese Buddhism. But the coconut trees say that it's in Hawaii, not in Japan or any other place. So we love this photo, but unfortunately, that pagoda no longer exists. But it also points out, one of the reasons for doing the book, and that is we were documenting the temples that existed in Hawaii, and Japanese temple Buddhism is dying because it appeals to an older generation, and younger people are not really interested in temple Buddhism. And so congregations are getting smaller. This is true for many Christian churches as well. Younger generations are not interested in institutional religion, and so the temples are slowly dying out. So this is a record of the temples that were there, at least in 2013.
Okay.
Oh, how do I move the? How do I change the slide?
There.
Okay. So, Willa.
I'm going to do the architectural styles, and I'm doing this because many times people will see a building, they don't recognize it as a temple, or they recognize it as a temple, Buddhist temple, but they only see the outside. And in fact, in Hawaii, the styles of the architecture of Japanese temples it's quite specific and developed in a certain way, unlike what happens to Japanese Buddhist temples on the mainland. In Hawaii, you have a smaller group of people, more connected. There's inter-influence from one temple to another, despite the denomination that they may belong to, because there are several different denominations of Japanese Buddhism in Hawaii. The immigrants just brought the type of Buddhism that they were used to. So we have a variety of denominations and some styles. I wanted to start with the earliest style of temple. You could call it a temple. It was used as a temple. It's the converted house style. And do you want to show a
What if
picture?
we just go through all of this and then, because once we go into it, we don't have to come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next is a traditional Japanese style that was done often around 1900. I should say the first Japanese immigrants came in around in the 1860s. But many more came around the 1890s and later because of agreements with the Japanese government to send Japanese immigrants over to the sugar plantations that needed workers. So the earliest converted house style would have been very early, in 1870s, 1880s, into maybe the 1890s. The traditional Japanese style temple was from about 1890 to 1920. And after that, almost till post-war Japan, post-war America was a simplified Japanese style. In the middle of all of this was a very unusual style called Indian Western. And we know it's precisely when it began, and it continued into the 50s. It began in 1918. And finally, we have a sort of miscellaneous group of temples, which I call the house of worship style. And that has a residential style, a warehouse style, a church style, meaning a Christian church style, and a Japanesque style. So it sounds like there's a lot, but in fact, you will see if you go to Hawaii and visit temples, which we hope this guidebook would help people do, you'd see a lot of simplified Japanese style and Indian Western style, with very few traditional Japanese styles left. All right, this is the early style of a temple in Japan. It obviously
In
is
Hawaii.
falling apart. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It is a plantation house. This is the kind of house that plantation workers were given. They used to pay, even up until the 1960s, like $25 to $50 a month for these houses that the plantation built for them. They'd have 2 bedrooms, maybe a kitchen, a living room. That was it. They're raised from the ground because that helps keep the termites away, which is a terrible problem in Hawaii. And it's a single wall construction with a corrugated iron roofing. So it's a house. But inside the house, the first immigrants who had no temples would take in the living room, cut out a hole and make a sort of box. And that would be the altar area. And so people would come for religious services, often without a priest or a monk or anyone to guide it, but just people gathering in the house that had this altar, and they put a statue up. They put candles on the altar. There's a record of one group that was so poor they didn't have money for any sort of altar decoration. They used potatoes and put the candle, stuck it in a potato to hold it upright and light it. So this was the earliest. They're really not built as a temple, but it was used as a temple. And there are only 2 that I know of that exist today like this. This one, and there's one other one, both of them not used as temples, obviously, but at least it shows us where people first started to gather, first started to think of themselves as a congregation in a temple.
Which islands?
This
This is
one,
Big Island.
yeah,
Big
yeah,
Yeah.
this one is on the Big Island. Now, the traditional style of Buddhist temple was the one that actually we all love in Hawaii. Very few of these are left. They've been replaced, but this is one, again, on the Big Island. The congregation was established in 1896, but this building was built in 1916. And what's traditional about it, right away you see that roof. The roof is very important in Japanese architecture. And that sloping, broad gable is made out of corrugated iron. In Japan, it would be made out of tile or sometimes a shingle-like material. But in Hawaii, with the rain, especially this is in a very rainy part of the island, corrugated iron was there. And what was great about it is they could bend it to have the curve that Japanese temples in Japan had. It's a hip and gable roof. So the gable is the wide angle that comes, a right angled roof that comes down and forms a kind of entryway. You see the stairs that go up, and then part of the roof extends. And that's the entry into the temple. All temples, Japanese Buddhist temples, are raised from the ground. A temple is a special place, so it shouldn't be just sitting on the ground. That's very handy in Hawaii, since you want to raise it anyway to keep the termites away, or to help keep them away from the foundation. And then there's a veranda that goes around the whole building, that you can open the doors, what looks like the front of the temple with glass. That's sliding doors, and you could open it to make the space for the congregation bigger. And in these temples, you sat on cushions on the floor. And
That's
so
beautiful.
it is. It is a striking example of an early temple, it's called a hip and gable roof, and the hip is on the right side, and you can see that roof part also extends. It creates a veranda, covered veranda, that's very inviting. And there is a transverse or piece of wood right at the top of the pillars that begin the stairs that will have a carving on it. You can't really see it in this picture very well, but it may have a trunk of an elephant, clouds, a lion carved at the end. So that entry is important, the roof is important, and it's a very peaceful sort of looking building, a gentle building. That's a traditional style. As I said, there are not a lot of them left. But from around 1930 to post-war to maybe 1960, you have the simplified Japanese style. So you still have attention to the roof. How would you know this was a building that is a temple, other than the sign on the grounds that say the Pearl City Honganji Mission? All the temples are called missions because, of course, when the Japanese came, they thought the Japanese would be going back, and this was just a mission to the Japanese in Hawaii who will return home one day. Of course, many didn't, but it's still called mission. At any rate, this has a shingled roof. It has a single wall construction. The windows are windows you could buy at Home Depot, even if they're made to look more Japanese shoji-like. So what's happening is the first generation of carpenters are gone. They don't have the skills in the second generation of Japanese carpenters to do traditional architecture, and you don't have the materials. And so you're beginning to use more American, what you could get in America. Now, the temple itself is still raised. You have to go upstairs to get in. The roof is still important, but you notice the entry is on the hip side of the roof, not the gable, not the long, sweeping, slightly curved roof, but it's on the other side. And that's because inside, for the congregation, it has become a sort of rectangular space rather than a square space. And so it's easier to go in the steps and be in the congregational area and face the altar. But you're not sitting. Now you have a very much more American influence, which we'll show you the inside a little bit later. The most interesting and most unique
This is
style.
Tom. Could I interrupt and ask a question?
Sure, anytime.
Can you go back to the house,
Yeah.
the tin shack house
Yeah.
slide, please?
Okay.
How do I go back, John?
So
That's forward.
the back arrow.
Okay, here.
Oh, you got it.
So
There.
where is that picture taken?
This is Na'alehu on the Big Island, the very southern part of the Big Island.
Okay, so why do I ask this question? My father was born in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1921,
Uh-huh.
and they had a house
Mm-hmm.
probably like this down on Nanakuli Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but next door was my father's cousin. And this story about I just heard this story about a month ago from my cousin once removed, let's say. You are correct about the termites. And I'll tell you, here's the story. They had a large piece of land and a tidal wave came into Honolulu at Nanakuli Beach.
Uh-huh.
It destroyed my father's mother's and father's place, and the city wouldn't let them rebuild. But my cousin once removed, they had a big piece of land. So they built a brand new house next door to the one that got semi-destroyed, and they continued to live in a shack like this, I guess. But when they moved from the old house to the new house, they burnt the old house totally down.
Wow.
Everything from the roof all the way down to the ground level. Why? Because of the termites.
Termites, yeah.
Yeah.
They said, don't move anything from the old house to the new house.
Yeah.
So all like the family pictures and heirlooms and everything,
Uh-huh.
they had to burn all that stuff.
Oh,
So I
my
gave my
goodness.
cousin once removed a lot of pictures and stuff like that. So this is a very interesting story to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's true. Most houses are tented regularly to get rid of the termites now. So we're back to the Indian Western style. And this is the headquarter temple of one of the major, in fact, the largest denomination of Buddhism in Hawaii. The temple congregation was formed in 1889. This particular building was done in 1918. It does not look like any Japanese Buddhist temple you would ever see in Japan. And that's what makes it really unique in Hawaii. And it's due to the fact that at that time, 1918, and there was a bishop of this denomination, Bishop Imamura, who wanted to stress that Buddhism was an international religion. It was not just a Japanese Buddhist religion. It was not just Japanese. And when people complain, Japanese complain, it doesn't look like our Japanese temples. He says, yeah, it doesn't, because Buddhism started in India. It traveled across to China, Korea, Southeast Asia, and finally gets to Japan. And now it's in America, or the territory at that time. And we want to show that it's an international and very ancient religion, not just a Japanese religion. So he hired all the temples you've seen so far, except maybe the first house. All of those were designed and built by basically Japanese, the Japanese immigrants. This particular headquarters temple, which is bigger than most temples and is made out of cast concrete and so forth. This temple was designed by a Western architectural firm that had no experience and knowledge of Asian architecture. But Imamura wanted that group to deal with it so that they weren't influenced by what a Japanese Buddhist temple should look like. And let me point out the Indian elements. First of all, and most important, is that round dome in the center of the building. It doesn't look like it's in the center because the photograph is taken at an angle, but that's the center. That's right over the altar area. That dome-like structure is symbolic of the traditional style of burial for the historical Buddha. The Buddha, when the historical Buddha died, his bones were placed in a mound, and a rounded mound. And if you went to India and looked at stupas, which is what the burial mound is called, that they have several of them honoring the historical Buddha, and it's topped by a spire. That form actually transformed over centuries to the pagoda form that you find in Japan. So the two towers at either wing of this building, you see at the top, are stepped towers where each step as you go up gets smaller, and then there's a kind of dome on top. That represents and a square building underneath that it's sitting on. You can see a little bit of the archway of the door to it. That is what that stupa or rounded mound form, that's the form it took as it moved into China and then Japan as into a pagoda, a multi-storied building. So you have basically three symbols of the burial mound for the historical Buddha, all in its Indian form. On the other hand, if you put your hand up and don't look at the top of the building, don't look at those towers or the mound, if you look at the rest of the building, it looks like maybe the entrance to the White House, It's very Western. The pillars that hold up that porch, entry porch up the steps, and then there's a flat entry area, those pillars are Tuscan style, specifically Western style pillars. And then the railing above the roof, if you look at the shape of the cutouts, that's a Mughal arch. That is an Islamic patterned arch.
You're kidding.
No. So this building has Indian influence in terms of Buddhist Indian and Islamic Indian. And it has Western influence in the towers. This is Bishop Imamura's vision that Buddhism was international. It had elements from everywhere, and everywhere everyone was welcome to go into a Buddhist temple. Now it's still raised, and if you go inside, it'll be very traditional. The amazing thing is that all the interiors of these buildings generally are very similar. So when you get inside, you see pure Japanese style, but from the outside, you get this amazing style. This style was so important that it even influenced one of the major temples in Japan, and they made it like this. Not exactly like this, but based on these kind of ideas. So Hawaii is, to me, it's really surprising how important this architectural style done by a Western firm, designed by a Western firm and a Japanese bishop have managed to sort of put everything together in a sort of chop suey mix of elements.
This is in Oahu.
Where is this
Wow.
located?
Yeah.
Yes.
In Hawaii.
Yeah.
Where is this located?
This is Honolulu on the Pali Highway. As you go up to the Pali, you'll pass it. It's very visible. On the very bottom left hand of corner of the photo is a bronze bust of the bishop. His name was Imamura,
Yeah.
and he was the one who's really, it's his design. He told the architects, what he wanted, the different elements. And so you have the Indian stupas, classical Western, and then the Islamic arches.
Now, when you go to country temples, they're not going to be like this. I mean, this would have been a very expensive temple. But this on Maui, Lahaina, famous town now, this is a sort of local version of that temple. You see steps up to a flat roofed entryway that is held up by four simple pillars.
Western columns.
I'm sorry, yeah, Western columns. And on the sides, you have two sort of rectangular buildings that hold the two stepped towers, and the round mound is, of course, in the middle. And then you go into the temple proper. And you'll notice it's got a regular shingle.
Shingles.
Roof shingle.
Asphalt shingles.
That
Yeah.
it isn't even very curved.
Yeah.
All of the materials, again, are very Western. They have to use what's available. But the style is a simplified Indian Western style.
And this
Up in the
temple
country.
was in Lahaina. It also completely burned in the
Yeah.
wildfire.
So we lost it. It was one of the very pretty
Yeah.
ones inside too. Now, this is another denomination's headquarters. It's a Zen headquarters in Honolulu. And it is basically taking that other style, the Indian Western style, and repeating it in slightly different ways. If you look, of course, you have to go up the steps to the temple. Then you see the entry with the pillars that are Western style. but they have these sort of flame-like forms on the top of the flat entry roof. Behind that, instead of a round burial mound symbol, you have a tower. So you have the step tower and a spire at the top, and to the side you have two wings with towers on top. And at the corners of the main building, you also have these little flame elements, which are Islamic. You will find them on mosques. And so again, you have Indian influence, Western influence, a little bit of Islamic influence. And it's a headquarters temple, so it's made out of concrete to last, and it's very large compared to a country temple. And one more version I want to show you of the Indian Western style. I love this temple. This is one of my favorites. When we have friends who are also in history of religion, like my husband, they come to Hawaii, and this temple faces one of the major freeways. So to get to Honolulu, we often will pass this. This is in Honolulu. So we were bringing a friend to Honolulu, and he said, "Oh," as we passed this, "I didn't know you had mosques in Honolulu." And we said, "Oh, no, it's not a mosque. It's a Japanese Buddhist temple." And he couldn't believe it because this temple, built in 1932 by a Japanese designer, he was told, "I want Indian influence. I want it to be international again, not just Japanese." And I'm not sure whether he just didn't realize, but he took the Taj Mahal as the Indian object that would influence his design. The Taj Mahal is over on the left, and the mission that I just showed you is on the right. Now, it's not a copy of the Taj Mahal, but it has some of the same elements, including a sort of tower right at the top of the steps to the right and the left that are exactly like prayer minarets on a mosque. And the call for prayer, you have those, and you have those at the corners of the Taj Mahal, you can see. Again, you have these decorative flame-like designs at the top of the flat roof building. It still has a flat entryway, but notice the entryway is scalloped, just like Islamic elements in architecture in India, you would see on the left. And then you have two side rooms that have a rounded top also. So it's the Indian Western style really makes Hawaii Buddhist architecture unique and an important statement about what Buddhism should be. The architecture is telling you something political and social about what is conceived as Buddhism at that particular time. Okay. Now, the last category of Buddhist temples is the one that I find least interesting. It is it's the most modern. This was a temple built in 1968, even though there had been earlier versions of 1911 and the congregation was formed. So they had earlier temples. But by the time they're in 1968 building their new temple, you've got a shingled roof, hip and gable roof, and a long rectangular building with a veranda on one side. It doesn't go all the way around. And if you were driving down the road and saw this, you wouldn't know it was a Buddhist temple. It looks like many houses in Hawaii. A lot of windows so that you get air, a veranda that you can walk out on. You need a sign to say, "Oh, this is a temple," but it's what the congregation can do. Many times the temples were built by the congregation, literally built by them, and so they weren't going to be fancy. Another way the last style is the house of worship style, is the warehouse style. Again, notice the date it was built. This particular temple was 1969. You wouldn't know it was a temple. There is a round crest at the very top of the building that will have the crest of the denomination. So if you happen to know what the crest of this particular denomination, you'd know what it was. But otherwise, this is a prefab metal building, the same kind you use when you want to build a grocery store or a warehouse. And the great thing about these is it has totally open indoor space, no pillars, no supports inside, so you can have a lot of space and arrange it the way you want. And the altar area will be the same as in any of the other temples, but from the outside, it really is function that matters. It functions as a temple. It doesn't have to look like one. Okay. This is the church style of the fourth category. I think you wouldn't have to know what this was to know it was some sort of church. You might not know it was a Buddhist temple unless you recognize the crest that's above the door, but the simple gable roof, simple pillars, the windows that are peaked, like reminiscent of Gothic style windows, but very simplified. But if you took that round crest away and put a cross at the top, it wouldn't bother anyone. It looks like a church. And I think that's the influence of for Buddhists to have a temple that sort of looks like a church, and it makes it clear that this is a holy spot, a revered spot, even if people don't know anything about Buddhism. And the final style, of which there is very few examples, is what I call the Japanesque style. It's a pretty modern style that, as you see, this one was built in 1983, and this is a headquarters of one of the denominations. It's entirely in concrete, but that roof line, like a sort of sort of inverted U shape, that's imitating a thatched roof that you find on Japanese castles, palaces, and temples. And there are three little fixtures at the very top center of the roof that represent tiles, ceramic tiles. It's made out of concrete, but ceramic tiles, because on a regular traditional Japanese temple, you would have these three ceramic tiles, often right at the peak of the roof. Other than that, oh, and as you enter, you have a cross piece, a transverse. Remember, I said there was a cross piece that would have a carving at the end. Well, you do have the cross piece with the crest of this particular denomination, not much else decoration. So it's sort of Japanesey, but it's very abstract and modern. And there are very few examples of this because by this time, the denominations were falling in number and the churches were becoming abandoned, many of them. There used to be about 150 temples in Hawaii, and now 90, and those are being reduced all the time.
So this isn't.
Where is this located?
I'm sorry?
This is in Honolulu as well.
It's in Honolulu. Thank you.
So
No, it's not raised.
no more termite problems because it's
It's
concrete.
concrete. Yeah.
Yeah, solid concrete. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so obviously architecturally we have a real mixture of classical, Western, Indian, Japanese styles. But there's one more element that you see in almost every Buddhist temple, and that's the Christian influence. But for that, we have to go inside the temple, and that's the pews. So as most of you know, in Japan, you go to a temple and you have rice straw mats. You sit on the floor. But in Hawaii, you sit on a chair, and in a Christian church and in a Buddhist temple as well, you have pews. And so if you're looking backwards like we are here, behind my back, I took this picture, is the altar, and you're looking towards the outer congregational area. Again, you wouldn't know that this was a Buddhist temple. This could be a Methodist church because the walls are very plain. There are no particular decorations, and the pews look like pews that you would see in a Christian church. But if you turn around, well, you can still see the pews at the bottom of the photo there, but The altar is a very traditional Japanese altar. So at the very front, there is the censer, the incense burner on that stand there. And then the altar is raised one level up, on top of which is the front altar table. And then raised further higher is the inner shrine. And there at the center will be the image of a Buddha. And on either side of that central image would be the portraits or sometimes statues of the founders of that particular denomination. The right side is usually the founder, and then on the left side will be the disciple who was most important. Now, at the very top of the temple, the shrine area is a transom, and no two temples have the same transom. Every temple has a different kind of a transom, and this one here has very beautiful carvings. And sometimes they're very simple, sometimes they're very ornate, but there is always a transom. So these are the basic elements of the interior of the temple. So this is the incense burner, and it has mythical animals at the top, this kind of mythic lion, and then on both sides the dragon. Now it's hard to see in this photo, but take a look at the mouth of the dragon. On the left side, the mouth of the dragon is open and it is saying ah. On the left side, the mouth is closed and it is saying And you find this symbolism. It's called the symbolism, and you find it on many implements in a temple. This is a candlestick holder, and there are two cranes, one with the mouth open saying ah, and the other is So the symbolism is that ah is the first letter of the Sanskrit alphabet. It's also the first syllable of the Japanese syllabary, ah. And whenever you speak, you have to open your mouth, ah. And when you stop speaking, you close your mouth. And so you're saying, some people never reach the part. Some people just keep their mouths open. But at any rate, it symbolizes the beginning and the end, kind of like Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end of all language. So everything that can be articulated, everything that can be written, everything that can be spoken is contained within these two syllables, ah and So it's the beginning of language and the end of language. And Buddhism, like all other religions, is very dependent upon language for making meaning. The transoms are all different, as I said. This is a transom that shows I'm just showing one part of the transom. The entire transom is a carving of the life of the Buddha, the historical Buddha, and this is a portrait of the Buddha after he is enlightened, has been enlightened, and he is now preaching in the deer park. And you can see on both sides of him there are carvings of deer. The front altar table is very ornate, and this temple belongs to the Pure Land tradition. And the Pure Land is the Buddhist equivalent of heaven, the place of perfection that you go to after you die. And at the front altar table, you see 6 panels. And the panels have carvings of birds that are described in the scriptures as being in the Pure Lands. Here we have the stork with a crane with flying amongst pines, and this is a symbol of longevity. It's a very traditional Japanese symbol of longevity. And this one is of the double-headed bird. So this bird has 2 heads and 1 body. And the story is told that one head was very upset at the other head because the other head was eating all of the sweet berries. And so the first head said, I'll show that greedy head, and fed it a poison berry. And when it ate it, of course, they only have one body, so the whole bird died. So both heads died. So the name of this bird is the bird of a shared life. So we all share life. So we had an exhibition in Honolulu of Buddhist implements, and we had this altar table out. And the governor at the time, Neil Abercrombie, came to see the exhibition. And so I was explaining the double-headed bird to him, and told him the story about how one head poisoned the other bird, and they both died. And he said, "Oh," he said, "that's just like Democrats and Republicans. And if we don't learn to live with each other, then we're both gonna die. So we either cooperate or die." So there's a good political lesson here as well, appropriate for your group, I think. The base of every altar is this very large structure, and it has a kind of a pinched waist, a kind of an hourglass shape. And this is symbolic of the Buddhist universe. So the Buddhist universe is said to be in this shape, and the Buddha, of course, is standing at the top of it, and it represents that the Buddha rules or reigns over the entire universe. So here is a very ornate um, gold and lacquered shrine for the Buddha. This is more elaborate than you usually see, but they're always very highly decorated structures that house the Buddha. And there are many different Buddhas in Mahayana Buddhism, in Japanese Buddhism, and this is just one of them. This Buddha is one of the most popular Buddhas, Amida Buddha. And early Buddhism did not have gods or deities or Buddhism, because the way to become enlightened was for you to simply purify or perfect your karma, which meant that you had to do good acts, don't do anything bad. So it's a very simple teaching. Do good, don't do bad. That was it. And it's all up to you, which is why so few people became Buddhas, because, very few people have the capacity to perfect their moral lives. Mahayana Buddhism develops later, and it's in response to the experience that early Buddhists are having in not being able to live a perfect life. I mean, who has a perfect life? Who is perfectly moral? And so now the Buddhas appear on the scene, and they can purify your bad karma because you can't. And so this is straight out theism. It's just like the Christian God. You're saved by grace, not by good works. Well, particularly Protestant religion, you're saved by the grace of God, not by the good works of yourself, because your good works, you're not able to really have enough moral perfection to save yourself. So the Buddha saves you. And in this case, Amida Buddha is said to be so powerful that even if you are bad, even if you have totally black bad karma, you will still be born in the Pure Land after you die. And so you can see why this denomination became very popular. What? I don't have to do anything? No, just entrust yourself to the Buddha. The Buddha will take you to the Pure Land, because we know you can't do it yourself. So there are some really very interesting kind of localization adaptations that we found as we visited the different temples. This here is the shrine. As you can see, it's fairly elaborate, but it's homemade. It's made by members of the congregation, and this is koa wood. This is traditional native Hawaiian koa wood. And in the same temple, there is an elaborate carving of a dragon. This is a close-up of that piece. And this is also made of koa wood. At Kapa'a, Honganji, Kapa'a is on the island of Hawaii. On one of the altar cabinets, there is a painting. And on the very left-hand side, you see hanging heliconia. In the center, lotus blossoms. And then as you move to the right, you see orchid blossoms. And at the very far right, anthuriums. And then above the orchid and anthuriums are night blooming cereus. So these are all native Hawaiian flowers. And you would not find a painting like this in Japan. The Shingon denomination is very eclectic. It's really into DEI, inclusion. You know, they'll take deities from lots of other religious traditions. So at the very bottom on the right-hand side in the circle, that's Shiva. You know, it's a Hindu god, but it's right up there in the altar area. And then if you go way to the left, it's a little bit hard to see, it's a little dark, but there's a Hawaiian tiki god carved there. And then in between, of course, are all kinds of Buddhist deities. In the back are carvings of Kannon, who is the goddess of mercy and compassion. And this was all homemade. It was done in the 30s sometime by a parishioner who took pieces of ironwood, which is a local wood, very hard. That's why it's called ironwood. And he carved faces of Kannon onto these pieces of ironwood that he found. So this is a close-up, and you can see they're really charming. The face of Kannon that's carved into the natural shape of the ironwood. These are altar tablecloths. Amida Buddha that we spoke of earlier is the Buddha of light and life. And the altar cloth here with the kind of the bulb round shape. Oh, yeah, I can do that. With the leaves on the side, that's breadfruit. So very, very important staple for South Pacific people, including Hawaiians. And then behind it, the red and green is a depiction of the kukui nut tree. And the kukui nuts were squeezed for their oil, and that was burned in lamps. So kukui nut is symbolic of light. The breadfruit is symbolic of life. And so these are the Hawaiian equivalents of what the traditional Buddhist deity Amida stands for, which is light and life. This is on the island of Kauai, and this is a pilgrimage route. In Japan, there is a very famous pilgrimage route on the island of Shikoku. It's 88 stations, it's 800 miles long, and people still go and do this pilgrimage route. You guys did it, didn't you?
We didn't do it, but we were there.
You were there, yeah.
And there was a little island that did a miniature version of.
Yeah. You can find miniature versions all over Japan, and you can find it in Hawaii too. So this one is on the island of Kauai. So if you don't want to walk for 800 miles, you can do maybe, I don't know what this is, 50 yards. But there's a trail, and you go up the side of this hill, and then there are these little shrines, and inside is the image of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. And so you can do the entire pilgrimage, I would say in half an hour, but Willa says it'll take an hour.
I think, well, for women, it'll take longer. We walk a little.
Depends, yeah. Aiko, it might
We
take
look.
Yeah.
Don't just walk.
In Aiko's condition, I might take her 2 hours. Yeah. This is also on the island of Kauai. It's at a Shingon mission. And this too is a miniature Shikoku pilgrimage replica. Each of those forms, it has a cavity, and inside each cavity is a Buddha. And so this represents, again, the Shikoku pilgrimage. So you can do this, station 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 88. There are 88 of them in the entire Huh?
Takes 10 minutes.
Takes 10 minutes. Okay, this one takes 10 minutes. You can even run on this one. You can zip through it really, really quickly. But if you notice on the right side, there's this kind of pagoda-like tower, and it is a memorial for the Japanese American soldiers who died in World War II. And if you notice the shape of the pieces along the pilgrimage route, it's in the shape of artillery shells. So this is very clearly a war memorial. So the back row was done in 1945. They used sand that wasn't washed properly, and so there was salt in the sand, and so the concrete is now cracking. So in 1983, the congregation recast all of these artillery shells. And so here, at the bottom, they're all numbered 71, 72, 73, marking the stages of the 88 station pilgrimage route in Japan. And then there's a cavity in which there is a Buddhist deity. But again, it's double duty. One is to replicate the pilgrimage route, and the second is as a war memorial for the soldiers who died in World War II. So let me go back. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the significance, the symbolic significance of number 88. So Aiko's mother really wanted to make it to 88.
Yeah.
Aiko, you want to explain what
Well, the hachi
Hachi, yeah.
hachi is 8 in Japanese, and
Yeah.
that's good luck or
Good luck, yeah.
So
Yeah.
88 was really the prime number.
But
Eight-
was it also something to do with Mount Fuji? Or
Oh, well, it's hachi is like this.
Yeah.
And so it's a half mountain, maybe.
Yeah.
well, there's two of them, so I thought it was double mountain.
Double luck.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Hachi, 88. So you have two. Yeah. The Japanese character for 8 looks like an inverted V. So it looks like a mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the war memorial, you can see there are 3 levels. Well, 1, 2, 3, actually 4, but the bottom 3 have little shrines, and within those shrines are memorial tablets for the Japanese American soldiers from Kauai who served in the 100th Battalion and the 442nd Regiment, and who died in World War II. And so, as I said, this is a war memorial. The shrines have never been opened until this year. And this year they opened it up, and I've been involved with this project to identify the names of the soldiers who are commemorated there. We've identified all of the soldiers who are memorialized in that shrine. And in September, there is going to be a memorial service. And for the first time since 1945, we know who's in there. And their names will be read, and stories will be told about these different people. So it's a kind of a poignant place where it not only represents the miniature pilgrimage, but also the names of the soldiers who died in World War II. There's a real resurgence in Hawaii today about all of those memories. The memories of the 100th Battalion, the 442nd, and of course, on the mainland here, there's a real resurgence of memory about the internment camps, like Aiko's birthplace. And so there's a lot of interest now in going back and looking at that history. So that's it. I mean, there's a whole lot more, but that's all we had prepared for today. So we'll be very happy to have any comments or questions that you have.
I have a question about the symbolism. I got a hanging when I was in China that has dragons and phoenixes on them. You've mentioned the dragon, but do you have any sense of, is that part of the religion, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the phoenix is the bird that rises from the ashes. And so if there's a disaster, the recovery from that disaster is often represented by the phoenix. And the dragon is a actually kind of a water deity. And so you'll often find dragons in temples as protection against fire
Huh.
because it represents water, and water can put out fire. And so
Huh.
often at the roof you see dragons because if there's a fire, then the dragon can bring down rain and put the fire out.
If only.
I have a
And
question.
dragons also, yeah, dragons can burn you or douse you. Either way, you have a choice. Yeah.
They are also symbolic of the East. Dragons represent the easternly direction. So you would find them there.
I have a question about the churches in America. Are some of them have been converted into houses because of the decline in some of the attendance? And I'm wondering, in Hawaii, are some of the temples that are not being used, are they being
So,
converted to houses? Because some of them are spectacular architecture.
Yes, that's happening on the island, on the Lapahoehoe in the Big Island.
yeah, Big Island.
Yeah, on the Big Island, there is a old temple that is now a private residence. There's another part of the Big Island also that has an old temple that has been converted into a residence. We visited an old temple that has been converted into a residence. And when you walk in, you see the altar area, where the altar was, where the Buddha was, and there is now a bed. And so the guy sleeps in the altar. So yes, that's happening.
What about the West Coast here on the mainland? Are there any Japanese Buddhist temples, or
Oh,
are we?
yes, there's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot.
But-
Yeah.
And you get them from San Jose has a very traditional, it's an imitation of a truly traditional Japanese temple. But then others are simply, I would say, the house style sort of,
Yeah.
they're not obviously a temple, it's just a building.
Yeah,
And
Oh.
you'd have to go inside to recognize it.
yeah.
Will and I, at one point, after we finished this book, we thought, well, maybe we should do a book about the Japanese Buddhist temples on the mainland.
Yeah.
But by then we were so tired. Oh my gosh. I mean, in Hawaii, it's not so bad because it's not that big, so you can drive around and see several temples in one day. But just even here in California, I mean, just to get to all of the temples, it's a real logistical challenge. So, but it would be interesting to do though, to see the ones that I'm familiar with and I'm not familiar with that many tend to be kind of ordinary buildings, maybe the warehouse style, that has been converted into a temple.
I think it'd be interesting to look into the impact of World War II on the temples on the mainland. And, there was a great impact on the temples in Hawaii in that the priests had been sent off to camps. Many of them were closed, but they were not damaged. They sort of picked up after the war.
The priests were sent to the camps because Hawaiians weren't.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, Japanese Hawaiians.
that's
Well,
right.
So
some
the priests were considered.
Yes.
they were considered
Yeah.
foreigners, first of all.
And
Yeah.
very interesting.
And there are also too many Japanese Americans in Hawaii. At that time, almost 40%.
Yeah.
And if you rounded all of them up economically, Hawaii would just, cease to operate. So they only took leaders like priests, newspaper editors, school teachers.
School teachers.
Yeah,
Especially
Japanese school teachers.
teachers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people who were leaders in the Japanese American community were rounded up and sent to camps. but number one were Buddhist priests.
Were there any camps in Hawaii, or did
Yes.
they get sent to the
There,
mainland?
no, there were camps in Hawaii. There was a camp, single camp, and it was for Germans and Italians as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, that got stuck in Hawaii for some reason.
yeah.
And for some Japanese Americans, but most of the Japanese were sent up to the mainland.
Yeah.
But there was, yeah.
Jim, you have your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I was going to comment that a couple months ago, I attended a funeral at the Buddhist church in Sacramento,
Mhm.
and it was a lovely ceremony. It was my son-in-law's father. My son-in-law is both parents are Japanese heritage, and my other son-in-law is studying Shinyo-en.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
He goes to Japan every couple years and gets training.
Mm.
Mhm.
So I'm fascinated by Buddhism.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Shinyo-en is considered it's classed as a new religion. In other words, it's an expression of post-war, pretty much, or at least 20th century, because most Buddhist denominations go back, to the medieval period. But there are groups like Shinyo-en that developed in the 20s and the 30s, or even after the war, and so they're classified just chronologically as being, new religions.
So where does Higashi Honganji fit in? Because I've heard that name so much.
Yeah, Higashi Honganji is very old.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's very
very
old. So it goes back, the founder goes back to the 12th century.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the status of Buddhism in Japan? I mean, in Hawaii today, is it a declining?
Yes.
religion?
Yeah.
Is it more or less dying out?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Very much so. For instance, the temple that my family belonged to is in Waialua. It's an old sugar plantation town. And there are maybe, I don't know, half a dozen members left. So there's no minister. They can't support the minister. And I was talking to the head. He's the president of the congregation. And I was asking about, what's your situation? He said, well, let me tell you what our board meetings are like, because, they're all nonprofit organizations. Bruce and I, two guys, we get together and we talk about what we have to decide. And I say, I move that, da 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 da. And Bruce will say, I second the motion. And then I say, all those in favor say aye. And he and I go, aye. And then I say, the motion is passed. Yeah. So they're still doing it, but it's only two guys. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
So what's going to happen from what you were saying, that some of them already have turned into private residences?
Yeah.
Is there any attempt to try to preserve them and make them like some sort of national treasure or whatever you want to call it?
Well, that's one of the reasons we wrote the book. We were hoping that people would say, we have something special here. We should preserve it. And certainly Lahaina fire made it very clear to lots of people what could be lost. But
It's a big issue.
I don't see
Absolutely.
solutions on the horizon. Since we wrote the book, there have been temples that we wrote about that went out. And it very often depends. The land is sometimes not their temple's own land. It was given to them by the city or by the plantation. And so when they go out, it reverts back. And there was one temple that's in our book, but soon after we wrote it, it was published, the city took the land back, and it's now a
Daycare center.
nursery.
A
They're
nursery.
using it as a school.
Yeah.
So in some cases, there is at least practical continuation of the building, but not as a temple. And
Bruce, it looks like you have some,
Yeah, sorry.
and you've also got somebody with you today.
I do, as a matter of fact. She keeps me honest.
Okay.
So, but what I wanted to say is that I've I lived in Lahaina, and for a while, my kids went to the school there, the preschool, and actually got went to a bond dance at the temple, and ultimately, my mom's house it was on Front Street, and it no longer exists. Uh, it so that whole area, I just such a tragedy for what happened. It was very interesting to see your book, then the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that's what a great cover that it is, because that doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what Hawaii needs is to find a bishop like Imamura, who did the Indian Western style, tried to rethink how Buddhism would be appeal to people. And I think Buddhism is very, I think young people are very interested in Buddhism, but not in temple Buddhism. The
Yeah.
temple Buddhism means sort of a family Buddhism, rituals that are important,
Funerals.
but it's not philosophy or ways of life anymore. There, I
Well,
like the Zen temples in Hawaii, but I was talking to a bishop once who no longer is alive, so I can tell the story. And I said, "Do you ever do meditation?" Zen, of course, is a word that means meditation, and the basis practice of Zen Buddhism in Japan is meditation. And he said, "Oh, no, we don't do meditation. Tourists want meditation." I thought, no, young people want meditation. You have tech
absolutely.
companies who have mindfulness classes, and that's meditation. And so I think that there has to be a new way of thinking about Buddhism, not as a family gathering place for old rituals. I mean, and I love rituals. I'm an art historian. I like rituals, but it's not reaching people. It's not reaching young people. I think Christianity has some of the same problems, the churches. So, I think it's our age that we live in needs some other kind of way to practice and way to think about religion. And it can be done in a Buddhist temple or a Christian church, but there needs to be a radical rethinking.
Well, last month we just threw up a slide that shows that there may be a reversal in the fall of interest in religion in Gen X. We'll see if that's sustained, but it was an interesting article.
We follow Theravada Buddhism, and have meditation group on a monthly basis. So it is around, and to me it really makes sense.
Yeah. I work for a Buddhist nonprofit organization. It's headquartered in Moraga. Actually, we were there this morning. And so this nonprofit, basically what we do is we publish books about Buddhism meant for ordinary people, and we pass them out for free, whoever wants it. During the pandemic, we had a very interesting development, and that was the requests that we were getting for our book, because our strategy used to be put it in hotels, kind of like the Gideon Bible. The Gideon Bible can be there. Why not the teaching of the Buddha? And so, we've distributed a lot of, thousands of books to hotels. But during the pandemic, the hotel situation just shut down. They didn't want the books. What shot up was orders and requests from the U.S. military. And we got so many orders from the U.S. military for our book. And it really, to this day, it puzzles me as to exactly why, what is it that appeals to our young service people about Buddhism. But um, the requests were so high that we decided to publish a military version. We have this little book of collection of teachings of the Buddha, and the book that we publish and distribute to hotels has bright orange cover. And in talking with some of the military chaplains, we were kind of joking and say, "Well, we don't want our troops going into the battlefield with a bright orange cover book." So the military version is the same book, the content is the same, but the covers are camouflage. Yeah. I wish I had a copy here. I could show you, what it's like. But same book, but camouflage. The military loves it. They really and we work with chaplains, military chaplains, and what they tell us is that, yeah, no, we're not taking it into battle. But what it says is that you guys, our nonprofit, you care about our troops. And yeah, we had this great debate within our organization as to whether we should publish a military version because someone would say, "Oh, we're not for war, we're for peace." Yeah, but we support people. And as it turned out, the people in the military, these young people in the military, are just I don't know. We just sent off a couple thousand copies to Fort Benning in Georgia. Yeah, so it's really interesting to see. Yeah, so
Yeah.
temple Buddhism is going down, but the interest in surprising quarters in other parts of our society, it's going up. Like your meditation group, your mindfulness group. Yeah.
Like in spiritual need.
Yes, yes, spiritual need or some way of dealing with stress
Correct. Yeah.
and anxiety. So
Jim, is your hand up?
Yes, John. You mentioned Moraga, and that I started thinking there's a woman there who has created what's called a Tibetan Oral History Project, and they are publishing now interviews with hundreds, if not thousands, of Tibetans who've made it into India. And John and I had a colleague of Tibetan heritage, a doctor who was from Darjeeling, India,
Thank
which
you.
is next to
Yeah.
Tibet. And, she shared with me some Buddhist materials. So anyway, it's all interesting. I'm sure it's not connected to your Moraga people, but it's there's more than one Buddhist interest just in Moraga.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, you find them in surprising places.
Okay, well, I think we're pushing our limit here. We're certainly appreciative of
Yes.
George and Willa for carving out time at the last minute, and thank you all for coming.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, that was
Thank you.
great for sharing. And
You.
so, thanks, John.
Yay.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, amen. Or ahum.
Uh,
Ahum.
It belongs to a type of that is also popular in Japan.
Sorry about the Pacers, John.
Very
Yeah.
ritualistic and very much centered on deity. So in that sense,
Canon is real popular.
yeah, real
isn't it?
popular. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have one over there, picture. And so in that sense, there is a lot of similarity. And in fact, our organization just translated this little book that we have has been translated into 46 different languages.
Gee,
Yeah.
all military.
Code. Tajikistan. I mean, some of the language I never even heard of myself. But we just did the Tibetan version, or actually, we've had it for a long time, but this is the revised version. And I think we sent, I don't know, something like 20,000 copies to Tibet or something like that.
Gee.